Hello mate, welcome back to the channel. We are back with number 16 of 36 of our 36 Ascendancy Class design project. So if you don't know, we're designing 36 Ascendancy classes before early access for Path of Exile 2. We're doing another Marauder Ascendancy today, so this is going to complete the three. We had the Chieftain and the Berserker beforehand, and this one I wanted to go a little bit out there and go for a wild card. I think it's a really cool theme, and that is the Outcast. There is no fate worse for a Karui than to be cast out, tribeless, to walk the world alone. Whilst most wither and fall, there are those who find strength in solitude. Unbound by the dogma of tribal traditions, the Outcast has forged his own unique bond with the Karui way, communing with the world beyond mortal eyes. His spirit is emboldened by his strength, and exile is his only home. So for this class, I wanted to try and imagine the opposite of the Chieftain. What is it like for a Karui when they're on their own in the world, they're cast out, you get kicked out of society, and what do you become? So we've got spirit, attributes, tattoos, and war cries are the kind of areas of the Marauder that I didn't feel we touched on before, and I really wanted to bring home here. So let's start off by, we'll start down on the bottom here. I'm going to get +6 maximum rage, 25 strength. You're going to notice a lot of strength-based stuff on this class. And then we've got resentment. Let their hatred be met by its own bitterness. So you generate 1 rage per 4% life lost recently, reflect 100% of damage taken to nearby enemies, and 1% less reflected damage taken per 1 rage. Rage effects reflected damage. So you've got two options here, and there are two versions. I wanted to offer alternate versions of rage usage that was outside of the Berserker. So this one is all about damage reflection, and you're gaining rage as you're getting hit, and it's kind of this resentment. That's why I named it resentment, is you're building resentment, and also the more rage you have, the less reflected damage you're taking. And then the damage bonuses you're getting from rage are also benefiting your reflected damage. On the other side, we've got aberrance, and so this is now going into a slightly different version of rage, and that's kind of spellcastery. So you gain +2 rage per spell cast, 1% increased mana regeneration per 1 rage, 1% less spell damage taken per 3 rage. Now, we know that I'd wrote this before this, but now they're talking about we're not going to be differentiating most of our main defensive stats between hits and spells, or attacks and spells. But that doesn't mean that this isn't possible, and so I'm not sure, maybe this could work, because they might still be tagging things as spells on their side of the game. And then your rage also affects your spells. So this is a way for you, if you want to generate some mana and go into more of a spellcasty rage build. Right, and now let's carry on down to the left. We'll go clockwise, so we've got some stun threshold and stun build up. And then we've got Petrifying Presence. So, fixed in fear at the coming of that which was forgotten. Anytime an enemy is attacking you, they build stun. Your war cries stun normal and magic enemies for 2 seconds. And you gain 25% increased stun duration. So, this is a way that your war cries can create a pretty powerful stun impact on a lot of the enemies and adds that, you know, might be zerging you. But it's not affecting rare and unique enemies, so you're not kind of finding weird ways to spam this to deal with those. Then on top of that, you are gaining stun duration, so that's going to help you and against rares and uniques, as well as them hitting you building stun as well. Alright, let's carry on, and we've got more stun build-up and stun recovery, and this one is Beckoning. So enemies you hit become linked to your weapon for 6 seconds. Throwing and movement skills will pull linked enemies towards the weapon. Deal 20% more damage to linked enemies. And then stunning culls linked enemies with 20% increased threshold. So we know that culling threshold is now based on the rarity, so this will increase that threshold by 20%. I missed out increased on there. The cool thing about this node, and the really interesting mechanical thing about this, is that we've seen that they want to have like axe throwing skills in the game. There might be weapon throwing skills, as well as movement skills, leap slam charges, etc. that we've seen on some of the warrior kind of showcases. They're obviously going to be available to us on the Marauder. And I thought this could be a really interesting thing, maybe Cyclone, where as you're hitting enemies, you're kind of pulling them in towards you. This would essentially make like a whirlwind kind of like Cyclone pull-in whirlwind build possible. And I think that is really cool. But it's also, you know, axe throwing. You could be dragging enemies around, teeing them up, throwing them into things. Could be fun. All right. Now let's we'll head over to the right and pick up these ones, and then we'll go into this sort of top section here. So down on the bottom right, you've got 25 max spirit and 25 strength, and then realm grasp. Any weapon or offhand you wield becomes ethereal, gaining additional stats. So these stats include for shields, that's plus 20% deflection. For scepters, that's plus 30% increased effect of local spirit modifiers. For foci, that's 20% of damage taken recouped as mana. And then for the weapons, you've got ignore 10% physical mitigation and elemental resistance per hand used. So if it's in 2 hands, you're doubling this. And the idea for this kind of top section is that in those offhands, you're gaining things that might be useful for spellcasters, but also obviously shields and more tanky. And this kind of goes into what we're looking at on the bottom of offering. I wanted to offer some kind of spellcastery maybe elements to this class, but also not just make it that, and have different kind of versions of that. So things like taking 20% of damage taken recouped as mana is a really good example of how this could be useful. On the bottom here, we've got you transform any axe or mace you wield at will, allowing you to use skills of either. The weapon type is considered unchanged for all other effects. So this means that the passive of, you know, your passive points and things like that won't change the base weapon type. But in terms of being able to use different skills, what I imagined is like you have this kind of spiritual kind of glowing effect, and it's like physically changing the shape of the animating and changing the shape of the weapon as you use the different skills. So this works for an axe or for a mace, vice versa. Alright, then on the right here, we've got 50 strength and 15 all resistance. I realize now 50 strength is way too strong, but we can change that. And then we've got tribal etchings. So this is our opportunity to bring tattoos back in the game. We're not sure if the tattoos are going to be in the game, but maybe they could only be accessible through this node. That could be pretty interesting. So your skin is the tapestry of your exile. You can replace any attribute node with a tattoo. Your tattoos have 50% increased effect. So maybe you have to put a limit on this. Maybe you have to say, okay, you can replace 10 attribute nodes or something like that. But the idea here is that you just gain access to the ability to convert your attribute nodes over to tattoos at will. And then how I imagine the UI working is you click on the node, and where we've currently got like, hey, pick which of the 3 attributes you want. There would be like maybe a new drop down list, and then you can drop down and scroll through any of the tattoos that are available. I just love this idea. I think like tattoos on a Marauder, let's give them something special in their Ascendancy that's themed around this. Alright, now we're going to go up to the top. This is a good old node. You've got 50% increased Warcry effect, and then you've got Outcry. Outcry is basically the Chieftain node that's on the Chieftain now, and it's infinite Warcry power. So your Warcries have infinite power. You get 100% increased Warcry duration, but your Warcries do not affect allies. And I think this was a nice little drawback to kind of balance it, and also thematically really works, which is like, you are the outcast, you're on your own, you've learned to be on your own, and so you're not used to, you know, buffing allies and stuff like that. Let's go to the left, 20% increased defenses, and then we've got Spirit Call. Gain 1 spirit mote for every death within 10 meters, so this includes allies, enemies, anything. Nearby rare and unique enemies grant you 1 spirit mote per second. You've got 25 maximum spirit motes, and these are like little floating motes of spirit, kind of like little tiny wisps that are floating around you. If you are hit, 1 spirit mote is lost, and the hit deals 10% less damage. Gain 2% increased defenses per spirit, empowering you. let's take this top section. As long as you've got spirit motes, you're taking 10% less damage from hits. Nice little defensive bonus. But then on top of that, you're gaining increased defenses. And defenses, obviously, as a general defense increase, is very powerful because this affects all forms of defenses, even ward. And then we've got this extra section on the bottom here, which is just like a nice bonus thing, which I try and add to these nodes now, which is reaching 25% life triggers Spirit Call. Spirit Call spends all spirit motes and lasts 1 second per 5 spent. You take 80% less damage during Spirit Call. So this is kind of like an immortal call that's built in for you. It's kind of cast when damage taken sort of immortal call. And this allows you, this isn't sort of like abusable, I don't think, because you have to rebuild the spirit motes in order to like keep triggering this. So even if you could find a way to go between, constantly get to 25% life, it wouldn't have any effect. And then before we go to the tier 2, we'll come over to the right. We've got strength and spirit again, and then we've got strong spirit. So this is all about leaning into spirit, and spirit being a resource for you. Gain 1 spirit per 2 strength. Gain maximum life equal to 25% of maximum spirit. Regenerate 1 life per second per 2 spirit. And then on the bottom of this, a nice little kicker is all attribute requirements can be met by strength. So this top section is basically just gain extra life, and you're gaining spirit from your strength, then you're gaining life from your spirit. Interesting ways to maybe stack this, lots of different item opportunities, ways to build your build. And I think, yeah, it's just a really simple, quite straightforward but cool node. And then the bonus on the bottom there, yeah, all attribute requirements can be met by strength. I just think that's really cool. That opens up a lot of build diversity potentially from this node that's a T1 node. Alright, and now let's get up to the last node for the Outcast. We've got some increased defenses and movement speed, and then we've got Spirit Touched. I can only show you the path, ignore it at your peril. Any enemies that you pass within 1 meter of you are touched. Any hit also hits all touched enemies. So this is like melee splash, but for any enemy that you've touched. And basically anytime you walk past an enemy, it'll kind of be like a tormented spirit touching an enemy. You're going to leave like a sort of little spiritual glow on them. And then you know that, they are considered touched. Touch can be dispelled, though it doesn't have like a duration or anything like that. So they'll just stay that way. And the idea is this is an alternate form of kind of melee splash. And you could think about different ways to use your mobility, group people up. If you think about the way that Beckoning works, then you could be linking people together with your weapon, pulling them in, and then touching them that way, and then, adding all these effects. On top of that, not only is that just a very powerful effect, you're getting this kind of linked melee splash. On top of that, you're also getting touched enemies explode, dealing 20% of their life as physical damage. So this isn't like a Hinakura's mass explosion. It's not a really strong explosion effect necessarily, but it is quite powerful in terms of like grouping people together. If you've got lots of enemies that you've managed to work around the battlefield and they're all triggering off one another, I think this could just be a really interesting gameplay thing, and also visually, I really like the vibe of it. So that is the Outcast, everyone. I think if I was to pick a favorite node, and what I'm going to do is, instead of doing a build this time, I want you to try and tell me what your favorite node is if you had to pick one. I think Outcry is obviously amazing. I think mechanically it's really important to having the game on an Ascendancy, and I think it's really at home here. Strong Spirit is really cool, and Realm Grasp, I love the way that you can, now use axe and mace skills, and that's going to be a lot of flexibility. But I think if I had to pick a single node, it would probably be Beckoning. I mean, the tattoo stuff's obviously amazing as well, and I think that could be really cool. But for me, Beckoning is something that I really love, the idea of these axe throw skills that we got a tiny glimpse of, and I would love to do more with that. And I can imagine, you throw your axe out and then it kind of pulls the end, it links to them, links to maybe a few enemies, you've thrown it, like you've targeted it really well, and then it pulls them all in towards you, and then you leap slam over to somewhere else or charge over to someone else and it drags them with you. Maybe you have to have a limit on the number of enemies that you can drag at once or can be linked at once. I think that would be smart, actually. But I think the gameplay opportunities there are really, really cool. So that is my pick. Let me know what you thought of this class, guys. I had a really fun time making this one. I think it was, I wanted to offer the Marauder something very different. We had the Chieftain and we had the Berserker, and I felt like they're really established ideas, and this felt like something that could be very, very different. So I appreciate you as always. If you liked it, like the video. If you want to sub, then subscribe. We're trying to build the channel in the run up to PoE 2. We've got tons more of these, as well as like news content and stuff like that I want to get back into doing a bit more of, so you can look forward to that, as well as all the other interesting things that come out over the next sort of month or so about the game. All right, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Friends, exiles, ta-da.